Hi, this is Vrinda. Imagine creating something so powerful that it destroys the very society that you live in. What would your life look like then? This question came to me quite unexpectedly and on Bihar election night of all days. Keep this question with you, keep thinking about this because I'll come back to it later as we go on. But let me first tell you how I found myself thinking about it. In all these months of covering the Bihar election, I had made no plan really for election night. And you know how it is. You finally get free after a long spell of work and you want to relax. But I had made no plans, and that probably was for the best, because that night, thanks to the generosity of some friends, I found myself in the company of Albert Einstein, or Einstein as he was called and he is called in the German inflection. Naseeruddin Shah's Einstein, written by Canadian playwright Gabriel Emmanuel in 1987, is directed and performed by Shah himself. It was staged in Delhi as part of the Delhi Theatre Festival 2025. So on the 14th of November, right after wrapping up my coverage for the day, I rushed to City Fort for the 8 p.m. show, and I had no idea that morning that by nightfall I'd be thinking about the very fundamental and very difficult question of responsibility. Our responsibility towards humanity, towards the environment, or towards the world that we live in. Because the play is about that fundamental question of responsibility. It is set in the last years of Einstein's life, in his Princeton study on what seems like an ordinary day, and it begins on a day that is like any other. It begins with a man, a professor, who prefers books over dinners and lectures and events. The play begins on a dark, unlit stage, and there's Mozart playing in the background. And then slowly we hear the sound of an amused Einstein reading in his study. He's sprawled across the floor, he's lying on the floor, and he's laughing as he's reading something. The lights shine down upon him. And he's telling us about how the earth is constantly moving through space. Nothing is still, he tells us. It's all movement. He smacks the floor once, and he tells us that the room that we are all in has changed by the time he smacks the floor again. The floor is where the door was a second ago. And then he gets up with quite some difficulty because Einstein is old by this time, and he teaches us more about his theory of relativity. But what you notice immediately is that Naseeruddin Shah is barefoot. And to those who are fond of Einstein, they know that he famously hated socks because they only produce holes, he says. Even in the play he says so. But when I noticed that, I felt a chill go through me as I took in that detail. This was a slightly nippy November evening in Delhi, and there he was, a 75-year-old actor, performing barefoot on a cold, hard stage for over an hour. And that sight revealed very simply that it's tough on the body. Theatre and all the arts of performance require a discipline that very few of us can live up to. Naseeruddin Shah walks across the stage for more than an hour with an intense performative stiffness in his body that he holds and carries throughout the play. He has to act the body of a very old man, a man who is incidentally as old as Shah himself is now, actually. This is an old man with an aching body, but one that has carried the genius of one of the world's most original minds. At one point, he also very briefly invites two members of the audience onto the stage. He jokes with the audience, he sits on the sofa, he sits on the floor, he struggles with his socks, with his shoes, he fiddles with his violin, he calls it violin. He tells the audience what relativity is. And it's not a very long play, and Einstein talks about all kinds of things before coming to the real question that haunts him, and actually is a question not just for Einstein but is also for the audiences that are watching the play, and for many of us who are who do our jobs in fields of social and public life. And by the end of the play, I actually found myself thinking less about Einstein and more about this question of our individual and our collective social responsibility. It is actually about what I said at the very beginning of this episode. Imagine creating something so powerful that it destroys the very society that you live in. What would your life look like then? Because Einstein is racked with guilt over his involvement in the creation of the atomic bomb. Uranium and the bomb, Hiroshima, they all haunt him throughout the play. He keeps repeating over and over the lines that President Truman wrote to America after the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. And I quote from the play, "My fellow Americans, the end is not yet. This will be the greatest achievement of organized science in history." And many times Einstein reads this line and he breaks down on stage. He says that he never wanted to build the bomb. He only wanted to work. He says categorically that war cannot be humanized. It can only be abolished. He says that he only wanted to think about light. But as audience, you do wonder if that is enough of an answer. Is it enough to say that you did not want to create the bomb and that it was the result of your invention, of your science? Is it enough? Is it not true that your work led to the death of millions of people? Can guilt absolve Einstein of his responsibility? Does one not have to live with the consequences of one's actions? He says in the play that it is after all intelligence. Science is intelligence, but is that all? And I again quote a slightly longish passage from the play. He says, what after all is science? Science is intelligence, but the mob always tramples over intelligence. It takes intelligence to create a tool. A knife is useful to the lives of human beings, but it can also be used to kill. Leonardo da Vinci invented plans for a submarine, but had the good sense to destroy it. Nobel was not so smart, Haber was not so smart, even Weizmann was not so smart. These are the names of other scientists whose inventions have led to the creation of weapons against humanity. For a man as legendary as Einstein, the play is not a celebration of his life as much as it is about the guilt that he lives in. It is guilt over the development of the bomb, yes, but this guilt is also about his neglect of his family. There is also anger and resentment over the way in which he was chased out of Germany for being a Jew. At a time of intense debates around Jewish identity, history, and the state of Israel and the crimes that it is committing against Gaza, the play reminds you that yes, the Jews themselves have been at the receiving end of historical oppression. And that then immediately compels you to think how the same people and their country have now unleashed such horrors upon Gaza. Sitting there as you listen to Einstein speak, you are taken to Gaza also. When Einstein remembers how he was insulted by a German scientist for being a Jew and humiliated in front of his colleagues, it is not too difficult to believe its truth. It feels like a familiar script, one that we are also living through at the current moment in our own country. As the play progresses, we learn that Einstein has lived in a world where German scientists were thrown into prison camps by the Russians, and he has been through a world where he had to escape his own country to survive. And he has now come to America, where he is seen as a communist, and he is seen as an enemy of the people, he says. He is always made into an enemy, and he comments on his state too. He says, So many enemies for an old professor. And take that argument a little further and you'll see that it applies to journalists and writers and artists and just anyone who thinks really in these times. So many enemies for an old professor. And indeed, I found myself also thinking about Naseeruddin Shah himself as an artist belonging to a community that is facing constant persecution in this country. Shah has openly spoken about his identity as an Indian Muslim. He has been trolled and targeted in public for speaking his mind on matters of politics. And here he is, acting as Einstein, a Jew who had to escape Nazi Germany to save his life, talking about issues of nationalism and religion and peace just a few days after the bomb blast in Delhi. When the play ended, I wondered if Naseeruddin Shah would make a comment about the incident in Delhi, about the attack in Delhi, the blast, or if he would talk about the Bihar election or about the issues of Muslims in India or the Gaza war. But he did not, and I realized that I respected that. I feel that he showed what the integrity of an artist looks like on stage and when in performance. Sitting in that hall and seeing him perform, we went to all these different places because of his performance, from Nazi Germany to McCarthy's America and then to Gaza, and we thought about our own present condition. And all of it happened because of what we as the audience brought to the hall. The performance had it all in itself intact. It was not upon Naseeruddin Shah to take us anywhere, but Einstein, the character himself, took us wherever he had to take us. And so when the play ended, Naseeruddin Shah made no comments about the election results or about the pollution in Delhi or about communalism. Those were questions that we had to think about, and I'm sure many of us did sitting in that hall. Because the play is not just about Einstein's dilemma, but about the political and personal struggles that so many of us have to go through in our own unique ways. It is about the choices that we make to preserve our humanity and the humanity of those around us. Do we choose to go to dinners and birthday parties, or would we rather spend our evenings helping little girls with their homework? It is about whether or not we are angered by war. Does it shake our conscience? Does war challenge our beliefs? Does it make us question authority? Einstein is a man who defies Nazi Germany and who then comes to America and is influential in the design of the bomb, and then eventually starts to critique this country that he has made his home for a second time. He begins to critique the American policy over the use of the atomic bomb. The play, therefore, is also about the internal battles of the conscience. Do you speak out against wrongdoings when it is not in your interest to do so? Should you stand against your family, your society, your country, if you feel that they are in the wrong? Are you patriotic if you critique your country or your government? Not all of these questions are raised or answered directly in the play, but the play does make you want to think about them. So if you get the chance, do take the time out and watch the play. This is Vrinda.